It was the winter of the year 2000, and Georgia Tech was walking off the field at Sanford Stadium, winners of their third game in a row against the Georgia Bulldogs. 2 years before that, in Athens in 1998, Kirby Smart left his senior season, his final game, as a loser to the Jackets. The guy that played in that game for Georgia Tech, his name was Brent Key, is now the head coach in Atlanta on North Avenue. And now Kirby Smart, 24 years, 26 years later, is the head coach at Georgia. So you got two players from those schools as head coaches of those schools. And that's winning that year 2000 game was a big deal at Georgia Tech. It got Jim Donnan fired. It brought on Mark Richt, which was probably not a great thing for the Jackets. Losing that game in 1998 for Kirby Smart was certainly a big deal, and losing the first game of his coaching career against Georgia Tech in 2016 was a big deal too. Fast forward to today, we've seen Georgia win 2 national championships in the last 3 seasons. We've seen them win every game against the Jackets except 2016, 2014, and 2008 in the series. And we've seen a slew of head coaches at Georgia Tech come and go. Whether you start talking about Brent Key's head coach, George O'Leary, I'm going off the top of my head here. George O'Leary, Chan Gailey, Paul Johnson, Jeff Collins, and now Brent Key. 5 coaches in 25 years is actually not the end of the world. It's more stable than Florida. But Georgia Tech has seen better days. Fast forward to Wednesday, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was at a meeting of Tech folks where Brent Key had this to say about the Dogs. There's nothing I hate more in the world, talking about Georgia football. It's probably the only thing I actually hate. When I say hate, like truly despise everything about it, I really do. Brent Key, Georgia Tech head coach, and trying to put as much of the hate back into clean old-fashioned hate. So I've got a lot to say about this because having grown up in Atlanta, I played at the Thriller Dome. I played at Tech's tennis courts. I've been behind the scenes during football games. I've been around the block at Tech quite a bit. They've got a lot going for them. One thing they don't have going for them is this little brother syndrome, which has really gotten to the point where it's to me, it's a little bit sad. But this headline here will get a lot of attention from here on out. What would get even more attention is if Georgia Tech would beat the Dogs. And having been around the block for a while myself, I've missed one Tech Georgia game since 1993. So I'm not sure there's anyone who's more an expert on this situation in terms of all of it than I have. I've had very close friends who have coached at Georgia Tech, high school friends who played at Georgia Tech. This is an institution, literally an institution, and they will not even capitalize the G in the word Georgia when they're referring to the University of Georgia or the Georgia Bulldogs. So they're quite petty. And personally, I think it's silly. Wherever you are when you're at Tech, you see, to hell with Georgia, or you'll see, that's really the biggest thing more than anything. Or, they don't say beat Georgia, it's to hell with Georgia, and it's in their fight song. So this is very much in the blood at Tech. The problem is they're too consumed with one thing that's going on at once. And when you look at an athletic department at Georgia Tech that has gone from, at the beginning of the century, mattering. They were a very good football program. Whether anybody wants to say that or admit that or not, I don't know. But when you talk about the turn of the century, Georgia Tech was a better football program than Georgia. They just were. Georgia Tech basketball, now, it fell off quick, but they did go to a Final Four at the beginning of the century. And it had been a little bit rough with Bobby Crimmins at the close of it, with Matt Harpring and Stephon Marbury, Juan Gaston, and guys like that. That could have been really, really good, but it just kind of wound up being just Matt, it seems like. But Tech has decided to feel sorry for itself all the time. I do not feel sorry for Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech should be far better at a lot of things, including football. And my opinion is that Brent Key could make them a lot better than they are right now. But he's not going to get there with this. He's not going to get there looking backwards. He's not going to get there with petty jealousies. He's not going to get there with, we hate Georgia. Steve Spurrier, I know Clemson, Carolina very well too. I don't know it as well as Georgia and Tech, but I know it very well. Steve Spurrier, when he got to Columbia, took some losses against Clemson. I think the first time he faced off with Dabo Swinney, he lost. That got Dabo that job at Clemson. And, during that time, Spurrier basically said to the folks at Carolina and in Columbia, we're worrying too much about Clemson. And he was right. They need to be concerned about the SEC. They need to be concerned about beating Georgia, beating the Gators. And, what he didn't say was, if we do that, beating Clemson will take care of itself. Well, what happened? 2010, 2011, 2012, Carolina beats Georgia. In that stretch, they also beat the Gators. And in that stretch, most notably, the moral of the story is 5 times in a row, they beat Clemson. That has never happened in history. 5 times. And I can tell you, I can report with complete certainty that I nearly saw the soul of my wife's life leave her after the 5th loss. It had gotten really bad in Columbia. And what happened was Steve Spurrier retired. So that's what switched that rivalry, okay? And Clemson getting better, but really it was Spurrier, okay, leaving. Carolina's, the lesson that Carolina could be learned in Atlanta if they choose to learn it, but they won't. And they never do. I mean, close family members of mine have gone to Tech, graduated. Those people, I love them. They are my family. They're wonderful people. They are tired of this. It's so stupid. And yet, here you have the head coach absorbing all of that energy at Tech, and then talking about how much he, quote, hates Georgia. You know how much Georgia hates Georgia Tech? They don't think about them. That's how much it is. Okay? I do want to touch on something real quick. As you can see in the background, our friends at Eco Poly, they're changing their name. Check this out, though. I want y'all to make sure that you can still get those quality products. Putting it up on the screen. So Poly is the new name. We're going to talk about this. If you still want to order direct from our buddies over at So Poly, you can. 478-374-6398. You can also, and I would encourage this as well, I would encourage you, look at all these dealers around the country. They're everywhere. You can go, there they are. This just topped up. This is in Thomasville, okay? Turner's Fine Furniture. I did not purposely click that. I'm just, pointing at my point, Lake Oconee Hartwell. I just drove through here in Eatonton the other day. They've got So Poly. It's great quality. It's made in Georgia. They're our buddies. They support us. So Poly has done a great job for a long time. Now you can get it direct from you can go to the warehouse or in Dodge County, or you can go to these dealers. And I'm going to tell you, they are everywhere around the Southeast and in the South. They are everywhere. And unfortunately, not that long ago, I bought beach chairs for the beach house. And this was before our deal with So Poly. They're not as good. You can literally tell. So check out So Poly today. Again, the website, I'll throw it up on the screen one more time. SoPoly.com. Hit them up. Now, let me get back to the Tech situation. Anthony Edwards, Juan Gaston, Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara. These are all guys that you could throw a grenade and hit their high schools from Tech, figuratively. And none of them went there. Well, Juan Gaston did, and it didn't work out. But now, my point is, no one should feel sorry for Tech. Tech needs to, strap it up and let's go. We hear about their academic superiority to Georgia, and let me just be very clear. Georgia Tech is definitely a better school than Georgia. It is also true that Georgia Tech is not nearly as good a school as it once was when you compare it to Georgia, because Georgia has vaulted up the academic in the academic world. That's just the truth. I mean, they were petrified when there was an engineering school that was started at Georgia. They feel like that was directed right at them. But University of Georgia can't really be what it's supposed to be without a medical school, Brian Kemp, and an engineering school, Michael Adams, basically. So those things had to happen, needed to happen. It's not going to take away from Tech. Georgia Tech's still one of the preeminent, engineering schools in the world. But I don't feel sorry for Tech, and I'm not coming from a position of hate. I mean, again, I know Tech really well. It should be far better than it is in football and generally speaking in athletics. And they always fall back on the crutch of academics. Listen, y'all, you got to stop that. It's ridiculous. If Stanford comes into the ACC and has more success than you in football, which I doubt, but I don't think it's out of the world, realm possibility. If that happens, there's no excuse, explanation. Duke has been better than Tech lately, period. I would say Wake, generally speaking, has been better, but maybe not as obviously as the way that Duke was this past season. Stanford, over the last 15 years, it's probably Stanford, maybe not, though. I'd have to go back and look. But nobody wants to hear excuses. If you're on the field, get it done. Vanderbilt's won a national championship in baseball. What has Tech done lately? When will you quit feeling sorry for yourself? Go out and beat Georgia. That's not impossible. South Carolina beat them in 2019. They were terrible. That was a bad South Carolina team. What Tech could do with a win over Kirby Smart's Georgia program, particularly this year on Black Friday, when the whole world will be watching it, would do amazing things for Tech. Way more than anything else that they could do with all the great these guys have had astronauts go to school there, and we got to hear they're complaining all the time. It's ridiculous. But I don't feel sorry for them. I do not. They have a massive endowment. It's larger than Georgia's. They should be taking advantage of NIL in a world where one of their sponsors is BMW. And, we always got to hear the poor mouthing at Tech. Well, take advantage of your situation, dole the money out, and go win. Don't give me the silliness about academics, because it's not true. It's just not. Stephon Marbury went to Tech. You're comparing him to John Stinchcomb? So please. The rest of us are tired of hearing it. Those of us who are not faked out by all this poor mouthing, I'm not tired. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's not true. Okay? It's not true. Well, you got to take derivatives. Okay? So, give me a break. And if you hate Georgia so much, beat them. Beat them. Beat them in baseball. Didn't happen this year. Beat them in basketball. It's not, you are not so crippled that you cannot be, frankly, a really good athletic department. You're in the middle of Atlanta. No one feels bad for you. There are people all around there. It is probably hot take, the most athletic city in the South. People in Miami, yeah, but Charlotte? No. Knoxville? Nashville? No. Memphis? No. It's not even like Birmingham. What are we talking about? New Orleans? Okay, maybe. Maybe New Orleans. Maybe. But probably not, because it's like a quarter the size of Atlanta. No. No one feels bad for you. Go do it. I get where Brent Key's coming from, but it's not helping you win when you're throwing red meat to the. Can I say red meat? Is that allowed? Or we have to say yellow meat? It's not. You're throwing the red meat, man. Just go beat Georgia. Nobody cares.